I wish on my behalf and that of my fellow senators to give a very warm welcome to the House to Jim Higgins, MEP for the North West constituency, who was elected to the European Parliament in 2004. I wish you, Mr Higgins, well in your role and continued success in your work in the European Parliament. It's a great honour and pleasure to welcome Mr Higgins, who will now address the House.
Good morning, the Alaska Hirley, agus the Hanadori. Is just the rash, agus nura Quidnium an Chashaw, Quidnium Chashaw, Seanad Éireann mar alma mater, mar is given on Gamach on New Law Jeg, Jimmy Ool, Nijig, the Hop the Hain, nor for me Gleach and telephone on Irtisha Gareth Fitzgerald, Garoshe eg anim new me Gudion Chashaw, agus the office and down Urim. Agus Marshin is just the rash rish. Mar Fishery on Aintus Orpa. Alaska Éireann and Senators, can I first of all say that I am absolutely delighted to have the opportunity to address you here today and to discuss matters of European interest. As I said in my few words of Gaeilge, it's very much like a return home for me because I regard Seanad Éireann as my alma mater in political terms. I remember clearly the 19th of August 1981 when I received a telephone call from the then Taoiseach Gareth Fitzgerald offering me one of his precious 11 Senate nominations. I was at a funeral in Galway, in Christ the Church, and that was in pre-mobile phone days, and I couldn't be contacted. And time was running out, and eventually somebody managed to fish me from a restaurant out in Salt Hill and tell me that the Taoiseach was looking for me. So I barely made it, and I had to wait until the 6 o'clock news to see was I actually going to be nominated, because while he asked me would I accept the nomination, he wasn't clear and he wasn't unequivocal. But I finally made it, and I have to say I enjoyed every single minute of the 11 years that I spent in this House. I was nominated originally, I was then re-elected, and in 2002 I was re-elected again and spent from 2002 to 2007 here. And this certainly was my gateway to politics. And I can say, from the point of view of the actual gratification I got, I can say having spent 15 years in the lower house, I got as much gratification in this House and sometimes more. And I think the level of debate in this House, where you don't have the same degree of rancour as you get in the other House, is not recognised. And the fact that this House has always been under and unreported, I think has left a lot to be desired. And that's why I was very sorry to hear and to see that Jimmy Welsh, who invariably covered it, week in, week out, his own column at the bottom of the Dáil report, and to Oireachtas support, I think we owed both a debt of gratitude. But at the same time, I would be very critical of the national media for the lack of coverage of the proceedings in this House. And this House has contributed a lot to national life, to parliamentary life. When you consider that the current President, Michael D. Higgins, started his national political career in this House. A previous President with whom I had the pleasure of serving, Mary Robinson, started her career in this House. Former Taoiseach Gareth Fitzgerald started his political career in this House. So, from the point of view of this House, I appreciate the anxiety that you're going through at present. Can I say that on the 27th and 28th of last month, I was invited to Poland to celebrate the Irish presidency of the Council by a man by the name of Krzysztof Malarek. Krzysztof invites a member of the European Parliament from each member state to celebrate its country's presidency. The Cyprus presidency, which ended in December last, was invited. The Lithuanian presidency, which takes over from Ireland in July, will all receive similar invitations. And the celebration was one of Irish traditional music, song, dance, ballads. Polish dancers doing traditional Irish dancing with exquisite perfection. A professor of philosophy reciting in Polish translations of Raftery, Callanan, Kavna, Irish drink, Irish cuisine. And it was truly a spectacular. And one has to ask, why should a Pole celebrate every 6 months the rotating presidency? And to understand the same, one has to reflect on the history of Poland. Here is a country invaded by Sweden in 1700, a country partitioned 3 times in the 18th century, a country invaded by the Russians in 1807, a country invaded by the Nazis in 1939, a country liberated by the Russians in 1945, and then forced to kowtow to Moscow for the next 59 years, and a country that in 2004 became a full and proud member of the European Union, a country celebrating re-liberation for the first time. Poland's history is very much a reflection of those European countries locked behind the Iron Curtain and under the cold and icy grip of Moscow for so many years. I have witnessed, Alaska Hurla, I've witnessed 16 rotating presidencies, and I can say hand on heart that the Polish presidency in 2012, their first presidency, was a huge success. It was a celebration of freedom, a celebration of democracy, of being an intricate component of the most successful political experiment in the history of politics. And that is what the European Union is. A mosaic of member states coming from diverse backgrounds with a well-established common set of goals and whose borders continue to push further into the eastern horizons of the mainland of Europe, with Croatia becoming a member on the 1st of July next. 40 years ago, the then Taoiseach Jack Lynch and the then Minister of Foreign Affairs Paddy Hillary signed the accession agreement for Ireland into the European Union, bringing the membership of the Union to 9 states. Its significance cannot be overstated. I referred to the success of the first Polish presidency. Ireland is now in the final few weeks of our 7th presidency. The Irish presidencies have all been very successful. They've been well managed, they've been thematic, and the current presidency is no exception. The mission statement of stability, growth and jobs could not be more appropriate given the current economic crisis. And there is a growing optimism that Ireland's performance will be emulated in due course by the other programme countries. I think we should reflect on the doom-laden headlines and prophecies in the media in January 2012. The predicted disasters did not occur. There has been no euro meltdown. The deeper dive into recession has not occurred. But what has helped in terms of navigating Europe back to economic recovery has been, in spite of occasional public street protests, the relative political stability as evidenced by the election process. Indeed, if one looks at the results, it is a testament of the political stability of the current climate in terms of the perception of what is happening in Europe. It's a testament to our current government that despite the heavy budgetary cuts that we have been forced to implement, these cuts have been implemented as fairly and as possible and have not resulted in the chaos and the anarchy on the streets. I take hope from the fact that nowhere in Europe did the political extremists advance electorally. In Spain, they were kept out of power. In France, the extremists remained on the margins. In the Netherlands, voters threw them out of the multi-party coalition in the autumn. Unemployment, particularly youth unemployment, is a huge problem, Alaska Hurla. As an Uachtaráin Michael D. Higgins said, there is nothing more corrosive to society and more crushing to an individual than endemic unemployment, particularly among the young. The still broken banking system has to be further addressed, and in this regard we need a fully fledged monetary union as in the United States. The overhanging cloud of Britain's possible withdrawal from the EU is for Europe, and particularly for Ireland, a major cause of concern. And as in recent local elections, the success of the United Kingdom Independence Party, unfortunately, is a cause for concern. As I said, Alaska Hurla, I have had the honour of witnessing 16 presidents. The 16 rotating presidencies that I've witnessed since 2004 have all been successful. I've heard Prime Ministers and I've heard heads of state deliver their presidency and their inauguration address in the plenary sittings in Strasbourg. One of the finest, if not the finest, was that of Taoiseach Enda Kenny last February. His speech had vision. His speech had style. It had substance. It was punctuated by regular and virtually universal applause. And when he concluded, there was a prolonged standing ovation. And having delivered his address, he engaged in a long and impressive question and answer session with MEPs from all sides of the House. Likewise, the riveting, eloquent, scholarly address by our Uachtaráin Michael D. Higgins at our April plenary session made one so proud to be Irish. As politicians yourselves, you know that elected politicians don't give or don't get that kind of praise or adulation unless it is earned. After Enda Kenny's address, a member of the United Kingdom Independence Party, who don't, as I said, give plaudits, very willingly came up to me and she said, "My God, he must have kissed the Blarney Stone." And I said, "No." I said, "The Irish don't need to kiss the Blarney Stone. That's for the Brits and for the Yanks." And the same thing was said in relation to Michael D. Higgins' scholarly address. You were there too, Terry. What is particularly important is the fact that the two big ticket items, which are of huge significance for Europe and for Ireland, are nearing finalisation under the Irish presidency. The Common Agricultural Policy has been in gestation for a long period of time, but I am very confident that the negotiations which are currently in trilogue will deliver a final set of proposals which will be approved by the Parliament on the week beginning the 10th of June. You will be aware that at 6:15 yesterday morning, the talks in relation to the Common Fishery Policy concluded after 36 hours of negotiations. These are the two big ticket items. The reforming Common Agricultural Policy strikes a balance between the need to support farmers operating in disadvantaged areas and the need to protect productive farmers in order to feed our growing world population. The budget for agriculture agreed at the February Council meeting means that the Irish agricultural sector will receive €11 billion for the period 2014 to 2020. Likewise, I am optimistic that the Common Fisheries Policy, which, as I said, was concluded yesterday and which will be finalised at the June plenary, will guarantee a much better deal for the Irish fishing community in terms of guaranteed sustainable livelihoods, while at the same time ensuring strict oversight of sustainable fish stocks. In this regard, I want to pay a special tribute to Minister Simon Coveney for his skilful management of negotiations for both portfolios. And I want also to pay a special tribute to his officials, first of all for managing to persuade the other negotiating teams to appreciate the strength and logic of their viewpoints, and secondly for keeping us as MEPs briefed step by step as the talks progressed. I want to pay a special tribute as well to what we regard as the common bureaucracy that are permanently known as the Perm representatives. And I think your daughter, Senator Éireann, is with the Perm Rep at present, the additional staff of 55 that have been taken on. They are hugely successful in terms of their negotiating skills. And thanks to the Lisbon Treaty, we are now consulted all along the line. As I said, you have noted my comments in relation to decisions on CAP and on the Common Fishery Policy. Had it not been for the adoption of the Lisbon Treaty by all 27 member states, our role as parliamentarians, as a European Parliament, would be merely a consultative one. And now, because of Lisbon, we have co-decision, giving the Parliament full power of approval or rejection. I referred earlier to the success of the Irish presidency. Some of you may know that since 2009, I have been a member of the Parliament's Bureau, which consists of the President of the Parliament, Martin Schulz, 14 Vice Presidents, and 5 MEPs known as Quaestors, not Wasters, Quaestors. And I'm the only Irish Quaestor. Each member of the Bureau is assigned specific responsibilities. And in my particular case, I am responsible, I have a series of responsibilities, but the ones that I fought and succeeded in getting, I'm responsible for the Parliament's library service and for the designation of exhibitions, among other things. And there are 27 exhibition spaces, and they're much sought after. And I felt that apart from running a very efficient and a very effective 6 months presidency, that we should also use the exhibition space to showcase Ireland in our many different spheres. And with that in mind, I block booked a considerable amount of the exhibition space for Ireland and for our presidency. And we kicked it off in a spectacular fashion. The month of January saw John Banville, and you know who John Banville, Wexford people in particular, Irish people. John Banville, the author of 18 novels, 6 plays, the Booker Prize winner, who has basically continued writing under the pseudonym of Benjamin Black. John Banville did his readings in the European Parliament in January, and I have to say it was an all-ticket affair to standing room only. Then we had the situation where Jimmy Deanahan, as Minister for Arts and the Gaeltacht, Jimmy launched the Irish Art Exhibition. 27 spectacular works of art, 27 spectacular paintings by Irish artists, and in addition to that, 3 sculptures. Last month we had a choir from my own constituency from Kiledon Choral Society, 51 of them, giving a backdrop to an Irish visit. I myself sponsored a competition in conjunction with the Donegal Democrat, basically for the best slogan for Europe. And we received a huge number of entries because Donegal sometimes, Senator Hart, feels a bit detached from the rest of the Republic. And from the point of view of making the connection, I have to say some of the slogans that came in were absolutely spectacular. And a child by the name of Mairead McGlynn from Eden Infant National School won the competition with her slogan. And the prize was I brought the McGlynn family out to see the Parliament at first hand. I decided to go to make the presentation of the prize myself to Eden Infa outside Linty's. And the principal of the school was a man by the name of Oliver McGinley, and he had them all pumped up, telling them that this very important MEP was coming and so on, who he was, and this was the guy that had basically sponsored the prize that Mairead won. And when we went into the school, he said, Adalty, students, he said, Shohi and Far William Louchfleet, this is the man that we've been talking about. Okay, he, Jim. I said, McGuinness. Soon burst my bubble and my parts. We have, in addition to that, last week, a pic tour, a touring exhibition which contained contemporary Irish children's book illustrations, organised in association with the Children's Books Ireland and Laureate Nanogue. We had, in addition to that, a poster competition. We have Leader coming out very shortly. We had Coltis Ceoltóirí Éireann, and I have to say they put on a spectacular in relation to the performance of Irish song, music, dance, and so on. We had a spectacular event in relation to a joint venture which was co-sponsored by Mairead McGuinness, and it was a joint venture consisting of Mborbia and Diageo. And whenever there's food and drink around, as my former colleague Senator Colin Burke will testify, you have no problem getting a crowd in the European Parliament. We have Jim Sheridan of My Left Foot fame and numerous other productions coming out as well. A musical group from County Cork called Pulses of Tradition are coming out, and that's co-hosted with MEP Sean Kelly. The ICSA, the Irish Cattle and Sheep Association, are doing a promotion on Irish agriculture on the 24th and 28th of June. I think overall the presidency has been going extremely well. I think getting the two big ticket items which are crucial for Europe and crucial for Ireland, I think that in itself is a huge achievement. We have, in addition to that, I was speaking to the Irish ambassador the other day, Tom Hannay, we have, in addition to that, during the Irish presidency, have pushed over the line, brought to fruition 21 issues, some of which, some directives and regulations that have been hanging around for 4 to 5 years. So overall, the fact that we've had the presidency for the 7th time, the fact that we know how presidencies work, the fact that we've very skillful negotiators on our behalf in the Perm Rep and the additional civil servants that we've taken on, I think basically we'll say that of all the presidencies, and all the Irish presidencies have been good, this has been uniquely successful. I know that you are basically in a situation, in a dilemma. I was listening to Senator Fergal Quinn last night debating the future of the Seanad with, I think it was Professor Owen O'Malley. I was listening to the Vox Pops that were taken on the street. The Vox Pops weren't very encouraging, I have to say, but then again, radio and Vox Pops can be very selective in relation to who to select and who to select to actually put out. So for the future, anyhow, enjoy your term here. I certainly enjoyed every moment of my 11 years here, and I know that you will continue to do a good job in terms of inputting into the whole parliamentary process. Alaska here, agus a Seanad Éireann, got a meeting behind the layer. Thank you.
Next speaker is Senator Lane.
First of all, I'm absolutely delighted and to welcome you back, MEP Jim Higgins, Deputy Jim Higgins, now I think we refer to MEPs, MEP for North West constituency. Indeed, as far as I know, you're the second Mayo man to hold the position of MEP. The late Sean Flanagan was before you. I've just tried to check my records there, and I can't know of anybody else from County Mayo that was MEP. And it's great for a county, as well as I know you represent all the constituencies of Roscommon and elsewhere. In fact, you were TD for part of Roscommon at one stage, as far as I know, or at least you ran for that part at one time. But you have been there since 2004, and indeed you had a dual mandate here one time. I remember it was a debate we used to have about your membership. I think you were prepared to get it for one of diaspora, as far as I recall. That was your precondition, which is fair enough. But you held both positions very well indeed, and you were elected in 2004 and re-elected in 2009. And I want to wish you success in the future elections. On that point, just as referring to elections, I regret very much that the number of MEPs looked like dropping from 12 to 11. Now, when we voted and we agreed to the admission of Croatia into the European Union, I didn't realise that as a result we would lose an MEP. It should not be part of the deal. Now, I appreciate there's this level level of membership of the European Union of MEPs, but when, for instance, if Turkey comes in at some stage, are we going to lose another 2 MEPs at this stage? Are we going to be down to the same number as Malta or Luxembourg or anywhere else? I mean, so I really believe for the most peripheral country in Europe, divided by seas, we should have, we need the number of MEPs we have. And I also know that Patrick Coe-Gallagher and other MEPs representing your area constituency work together. Marion Harkin, who were here as well, other members were here. So I just think that Ireland can use the veto, but I understand they're not using the veto as far as that's concerned. And even the reorganisation of the constituencies now, I'm sure is concern for sitting MEPs that are seeking re-election, and I understand that you're definitely seeking re-election for the next election in 2014. And at that stage, you don't even know your constituency, really. You know the base is your constituency, but you could have County Meath could be in, or some other place could be in as well. So I just think it's a very unsatisfactory situation, and because the role of the Parliament is very important indeed. In relation to the present crisis in relation to farming, has it become an issue at the Parliament, and you might be able to elaborate on this situation, when you realise that 143,000 cattle have died since the 1st of January to the 1st of May? Now, that's around 17,000 more than last year. I mean, that'll give you an idea of this crisis that's there. As mentioned this morning on the order of business, where there's a father held up in the French port. And is there no support whatsoever, an emergency appeal or support from the European Union when it comes to a crisis like this? For instance, we are getting fodder from UK, we are getting fodder from France, and the Department of Agriculture has given less than was given in 1998. 1 million, 2 million, 3 million, compared to about 12 million in 1998 for a similar crisis. The IFA have come in and co-ops have given some assistance. But on the ground, it is very serious. In Castlereagh Market the other day, there was a queue and very disappointed farmers who were not in a position to get fodder. We ourselves contacted Connacht Gold at League, where they have a plant. We're on the bottom of a long list. Adjoining farmers are very helpful. I must say that there's been a great camaraderie between farmers in each community, and they're certainly working together, and they're not, nobody to my knowledge has exploited the fodder in their area. So it is an ongoing crisis, and it is something that would be, I feel, that should be raised in relation to the future, because the distribution of fodder between European Union countries at cost price, and where there would be a surplus in one country, like France, for instance, or Britain for that matter, there should be some protocol and procedure that we know that this is available. You can stock up for bad winters, but the trouble is there's an ongoing, and you know yourself because you're travelling all over county, all the constituencies, and you see exactly the cattle, the qualities that's happening at the moment. And when I was down in Knock recently, I could see going through the areas in your former constituency, the effect it has at the moment. So I know that you're aware of it, I know that you're doing your best, but as a member of the European Parliament, it's very important. Now, as far as the presidency is concerned, and I want to thank you for your very kind comments in relation to Sinead. It was there. Great experience for the members or the staff who went out from the different departments to back up the presidency. But I would have said that, not beyond my time, am I? No? Well, pardon? Oh no, it's unbelievable. No, I just want to say, I want to place a record. As a former minister, I was the negotiator for the Single European Act. Believe it or not, nobody gives me any recognition of that. But I only was there because I had the staff, the ambassador, all the backup staff. And I think it's a good opportunity. I want to thank you for mentioning on behalf of those people who are the front line. And every government have been served equally by the permanent staff in Brussels. We have the best, and that's recognised. Our presidencies always have been well, and I want to congratulate this government and the staff, the ambassador particularly in Brussels. The negotiations have taken place, very crucial negotiations that have been very successful to date, and all I can do is wish them well in the future and wish them success. But to know that the support I had, and I recall it so well, being briefed, I go out on a Sunday evening for meetings on Monday, the briefing was second to none, and we could always achieve that above and beyond anywhere else. And in fact, it's a proof that when Croatia had the presidency, there was staff seconded from Ireland to help them during that presidency. So again, thank you for being here MEP Jim Higgins. Nice to see you back in the Seanad. I know you started here in 1981 with that call from the late great Gareth Fitzgerald, and I want to wish you continued success, and I hope that we'll keep the liaison between. And this, I want to thank our leader of the House for arranging these meetings. The fact that we can bond between this Parliament and the European Parliament is very important. That line of communication between us is vital, and long may it continue.
Thank you, Senator Layton. I now call Senator Colin Burke. You have 5 minutes, Senator.
Thank you very much, Leska Hirlook. MEP Jim Higgins, you're very welcome to the House here, and it's, I suppose, welcoming you home in the sense that you spent a number of years here and made a very valuable contribution in your time here, both in the Dáil and Seanad. I would also like to thank you for your help and assistance during my brief period in the European Parliament, and indeed working there with both your staff and yourself, and indeed all of the Irish MEPs, was also a huge learning exercise for me. But I think the contribution that MEPs make at European level, I think it's not given the recognition that it deserves. And I think that's one of the problems, I suppose, is that the number is so small, it's very difficult for media to focus on the work that they are doing. I think it was important when you opened your address here today, mentioning the current President, Michael D. Higgins, former President Mary Robinson, and former Taoiseach, the late Gareth Fitzgerald. And I think it's interesting to see, their careers starting off here. And it just goes to show the major contribution that they as members made here, but also after they moved on, and how both the current President Michael D. Higgins and Mary Robinson are making a huge contribution many years after leaving here. And I think it's important that we give recognition to that. You mentioned the Irish presidency and your invitation to Poland, and I think it's interesting you mentioned that, because I happened to be Lord Mayor of Cork in 2004 when the 10 new countries came into Europe. And on that day, the 1st of May, we designated a number of cities around the country to each country. In other words, Cork, for instance, Slovakia was assigned to Cork, and on that particular day, we closed off the entire of Patrick Street in Cork and allowed the Slovakian community to set up stalls on the street in Cork so that they could show to us what they had to offer to us in Ireland. And I think it was an interesting exercise. And I think it might be interesting to look at, on European Day, that we again would go back to that and maybe assign one country to 27 cities and towns, and after the end of June, it'll be 28, in other words, 27 other countries, and assigning one to each town or city around the country. I think it would be a useful exercise as regards making that connection with Europe. And also, I suppose, giving the significance now that the markets that we have access to, we've access to markets of over 500 million people. And I think, it's interesting, while people may be critical of Europe, I think the great thing that the benefit has been for Ireland is the fact that we've access to a huge market now. And we have, at the same time of getting and gaining access to that market, we've retained our access to the American market, which is also making a very valuable contribution to the Irish economy. I think the interesting thing in relation to, and you've touched on this, the increased powers of the Parliament. It's extremely important that the members of the European Parliament that we have are very effective and work in relation to protecting Ireland's interests, at the same time as regards helping the European economy and Europe overall to continue to develop. On Tuesday of this week, I was in London at a global diplomatic forum on European security and defence policy, and it was interesting to listen to the contributions there and about how America now is I suppose, stepping back in its support and protection that is provided to Europe over the last 50 years, and how we need to be conscious of that, and about Ireland's role, while we do not propose, and there is no even discussion on we changing our role as a neutral country, how we can still play a very important part in that security and defence role. And I think it was interesting the role that Ireland played in joining up with the French and a number of other countries in their role where we stepped into the breach in relation to Chad and providing protection for over 500,000 people inside refugee camps and IDP sites. And it's about Europe's role as regards working with the UN, because in Ireland we have the triple lock system, UN mandate, government approval, approval of Dáil Éireann, but how we can continue on in that role, but working with our European colleagues, and I think we have a very valuable contribution to make in that. I also think that the issue that we need to be very conscious of, and the need for MEPs to get the necessary support. We have over 20 committees in the European Parliament. Ireland has, our MEPs are on 14 of those committees. It means that there are 6 of our committees where we do not have a direct representation, and I think it even emphasises more the need for MEPs to get the necessary support to make sure that we are watching all of the issues in the Parliament as more and more issues, and as the Parliament now has more powers. And I think the permanent reps who are giving support there is extremely important. But I think the research staff that MEPs themselves have, it's extremely important that they get the necessary funding and support to make sure that they're able to do the work that they're required to do. And I certainly, in my time in the European Parliament, I always found the research staff worked extremely hard to give that backup support to the MEPs. I think there's a number of interesting issues which you touched on, and the common agricultural policy and the whole fisheries policy. And I think, you know, one of the things I would say in relation to Simon Coveney as Minister, I think the 3 years that he spent in the European Parliament has been hugely beneficial to him in dealing with the issues and also in dealing with the other countries in coming to an agreement. And I think that's there's clear evidence of that experience coming out now in his contribution. So again, I'm under pressure from the Lasca here, look, to thank you for your contribution. I think it's extremely important that we do continue to give the necessary space for our MEPs to make their contributions here, and also to get that information out in the public domain and to the media. And again, thank you for your contribution. Thank you for your contribution here in Dáil Éireann and the European Parliament, and wishing you well in your future career. Thank you indeed.
Thank you very much, Senator Burke. And I'll call Senator Gillian Van Turnout. Yeah, 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. And I too would like to join in welcoming Jim Higgins, MEP, to the House. Both your history, both in this House and in Dáil, and when you were recalling that fateful phone call, it's actually 2 years this Monday. I would have got that phone call when I was in China. Equally, a great story, and I'll never forget the moment of getting the phone call and the pride. I want to acknowledge your roles, though, that haven't been highlighted yet on EU suicide prevention strategy and mental health treatment and strategy, the EU funding for the care of the elderly, and the increased access to cross-border health care. These are issues I know that you've played very significant roles, as well as looking at children and youth issues, whether it's childhood obesity, child literacy, and these are some of the issues that don't often get played out here in Ireland, but these are very important issues where their EU strategies are developed, which then filter down to Ireland. And obviously also your role as Questor, which is a very important role, and your role in introducing a cultural programme. And I happened to be there in January when you had John Banville, and it was an excellent initiative. As you've said, Ireland's current presidency is very important. It sets a number of milestones, and I certainly would like to join in the recognition of both the roles that the Irish ministers have played, and I think we all have a sense of pride when we hear on the news about Minister Coveney delivering a deal that people said would not be possible within this presidency. And I think we shouldn't underestimate the deal that has been struck and the officials that is supporting that work. But I wanted to raise the issue, for me, is about the role of citizens in Europe, because I do have a concern that Europe has slightly steered off its path, and you know, to go back to that original path of the community where all voices, no matter how small, were heard equally, where understanding and promotion of diversity of culture and ideas were to the fore. And last week I had the opportunity to be in Vienna. I was very privileged to be speaking in the Austrian Chancellery on the Future of Europe Group report on striking the balance between unity and diversity, which is a report that hasn't got much publicity in Ireland, but 11 foreign ministers from EU member states, not Ireland, came together and wrote a paper on what they believe is the future of Europe. Now, my difficulty with the report is that it's a very top-down approach that they are progressing. And the unity, actually, if you really read into the report, and I'm really giving headlines here, is they're looking at the common security policy and those type of areas that we could cooperate, rather than maybe looking at those issues that really are directly affecting the citizens. And I think we do need to be careful with our engagement on EU issues, and I think it would be a welcome debate here in the House, actually, Leader, on the future of Europe. It's an interesting paper. It's only 7 pages, but there's a lot of content within those pages. And I think it's very interesting that although the foreign ministers have all put their names to the paper, it's only actually on one official website, and that's the German foreign minister's, Mr. Westerwelle's website. But they have put it out there for debate. But there's often a perception that popular sentiment towards the European Union has turned sour because of this power that has moved to the centre of Europe between France and Germany. But just to note that the European Movement Ireland commissioned a Red Sea poll earlier in the year, and 85% of respondents believe that Ireland should remain part of the European Union. And 83% of Irish adults believe that, on balance, Ireland has benefited from membership of the EU. And I think we shouldn't underestimate that figures. That we can have a serious and engaging debate with citizens Ireland. They do see the benefits, and we should be saying, how can we develop that further? So, I would be very interested to hear your opinions on how post-presidency, because, you know, it's going to be over soon enough, we can ensure that the EU agenda focuses on the issues that most affect our citizens, and how can we best generate that engagement with people and support for the EU among Irish people. That critical friend approach, I would call it. You know, when you have a really good friend, they'll tell you what they like and what they don't like. Because I have concerns, for example, on the multi-annual financial framework. I know it's close to coming to completion, but I feel we may have a deal that will end up having to be rediscussed every year and rebalanced because we won't grasp the nettle. And so we're putting forward a budget and saying, here's the budget, but actually the Parliament are going to each year end up having to grapple and grasp with that budget. So I am concerned, and I would very much welcome any thoughts you have to share on that. And I do want to echo your congratulations to Minister Coveney in particular. I think the role on the common fisheries and the CAP, for me, somebody who's not from an agriculture background, although 12 years on the Economic and Social Committee with farmers' representatives, I learned more about farming than I ever probably need or want to know. But I think it is tremendous that Ireland has played a role in bringing people together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Van Turnhout. Exactly within time. Thank you so much, Senator Riley. You have 2 minutes plus.
Thanks very much. I like the discretion there. First of all, I was just following on just in terms of the role of citizens, just like to touch on the issue of turnout at European Parliament elections. There has been a decline since 1979. In that year, there was 62% peak, but now in the last European Parliament election, 2009, that went down to 43%. And of the 27 member states, 18 were unable to secure turnouts of more than 50% in 2009, and of that, 11 had turnouts of less than 40%. The Eurobarometer survey from last December showed the trust in European institutions has been on a downward trend since 2007, and in that report it showed that 33% of people trust the EU institutions. Now, do you think that greater European integration will widen the gap between European citizens and the EU institutions, and do you think that there is an appetite, a real appetite out there for further integration, and how do you think democratic legitimacy and accountability through parliamentary oversight with distinct roles at the level of national parliaments and the European Parliament might be more clearly defined, and how do you think national parliaments, whether it be just the Dáil, or if we're still here in a couple of years, the Seanad as well, how do you think we will strengthen our role in the European and the national semester programme? Just in terms of, obviously, the current debates in terms of the multi-annual financial framework, just one issue that had struck me in the drafts that had been going through was in terms of macroeconomic conditionality. Can you advise if that's still on the table in terms of cohesion structural funds? What position, for example, is your party group in the European Parliament taking on macroeconomic conditionality? And indeed, what would you be doing as a parliamentarian to actually oppose this conditionality? Following on from that, obviously the June plenary meeting of the Parliament, they're hoping that there will be an agreement on the MFF regulation. Do you think that will happen? Do you think that the Parliament will give its consent to that? Just in terms of the multi-annual financial framework, and indeed how that links to the Irish presidency, we've heard for a long time that the youth guarantees is a pillar of the Irish presidency, and we have been pushing that. And I know there was agreement with Council for the €6 billion youth employment initiative in the multi-annual financial framework from 2014 to 2020, but obviously that's being held up until the MFF is agreed upon at Parliament. What is your opinion, if you look at Council recommendations, for example, that have been made, that they're saying that obviously youth unemployment is a big issue, we need to be implementing measures as soon as possible. Do you think that Member States can actually afford to wait for this to be agreed to take action? I know that we obviously, until there has been agreement that the funding from the Youth Employment Initiative isn't going to be released, but in terms of Member State preparations, do you think that we should be making preparations for the rollout of that, indeed matching funding, because €6 billion across all Member States with youth employment of greater than 25% across those 6 years, I don't think it's enough, it's inadequate. And finally, in terms of the issue, the end of our presidency is going to mark the 1-year anniversary of the June 2012 European Council meeting, which did make the call for the end of to break the link between the banking debt and sovereign debt. Can I just ask what progress, in your opinion, has been made to date on this? Is there an appetite in Parliament for this, or a real appetite? And indeed, within your own political grouping, what is the appetite and the thinking there?
Thank you, Senator Riley. I now call Senator Lorraine Higgins. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Laska Hirelock. I want to welcome you, Deputy Higgins, into the Seanad today. I believe Deputy is the proper title that's given to members of the European Parliament when you're at work. And I have to say I get a bit of a kick out of that name as well, because it's certainly something I aspire to within our own national Parliament. But always a very welcome departure to have members of the European Parliament address the House, and I think it's a great initiative that was put forward by the leader in our committee that runs the Seanad, but especially given your experiences in dealing in local, national and European politics. It's great to hear your own particular experiences in the European Union, and in particular this time during our presidency. And I can tell that there's no doubt about it that you have been and are a great ambassador for the country, and Ireland can be justifiably very proud to have you representing our interests in Europe. It is a very timely visit, as I've said, to the Seanad, given that Ireland is holding the presidency, and many ministers and officials have visited the country over the past 5 months and will continue to visit over the next month or so. And this is the 7th time, as you know, that we have held this responsibility, and it is undoubtedly an honour for the country. The 2013 presidency comes as we celebrate the 40th anniversary of our accession to the European Economic Community in 1973, and it is rooted in our continuing commitment to the European project since we joined. And as we do mark this 40th year of our membership, we should reflect on the remarkable changes that have taken place in our country in terms of infrastructure, as well as culturally, politically and economically. And when I look back to 1973, I can remember the Laska Hirelock, Senator Mullins, mentioning back then we didn't even have a motorway in Ireland. So the wonderful changes that have come about as a result of structural funds is something to be welcomed, and it's a very, very big positive from our membership of the European Union. But in 1973, Ireland's wealth stood at that point in time at 60% of the European average, while today, despite the effects of the economic crisis, Ireland's level of prosperity is above the European average. In the early 1970s, more than 50% of our exports went to our nearest neighbour, the United Kingdom. But today we've advanced trade, goods and services globally. In particular, EU economies such as Germany have become increasingly important for Irish exporters. These have been some notable and welcome points in our development and change since we did become a member of the Union in 1973. However, I suppose for the purposes of this submission today, I want to focus on what our priorities and aims for our EU presidency have been, which I have no doubt will help shape and contribute not only to Europe's growth and recovery priorities, but even to our own. Our presidency has already made huge strides towards addressing our debt burden. Indeed, within 2 short months of us gaining the presidency, we helped facilitate an easing of Ireland's debt burden, given that we secured a deal on the Anglo promissory notes. And this is something that other political parties at the time thought wasn't possible. So it's certainly a great triumph on behalf of the Irish people. And I know MEPs, members of the European Union that are from Ireland, had their part to play in that, along with the Minister for Finance and various other government officials, to include the Taoiseach and the Taoiseach as well. However, we need to continue to highlight the importance of Ireland's debt situation and keep pushing for a further debt deal to come to fruition on our sovereign debt. So I would implore you to do all you can and to liaise with your colleagues in Europe to try and achieve this. And as a country, you know, we have gone through a lot. We've gone through very, very financially turbulent times, exacerbated only by a world recession. However, we all know in great adversity, opportunity knocks, and now is the time that the EU can display its strength and stability and show that we have an ability to foster growth, even in these much maligned times. We must show that once we secure steady growth, we can then foster employment opportunities and contribute to the welfare of each and every one of our people. And I think the best example of Europe's ability to confront such trying and testing issues is that of Ireland's own experience in recent times. Undoubtedly, in the past, Ireland has gone through peaks and troughs in terms of growth. And in the 15 years preceding 2008, we were the envy of Europe with our unprecedented economic growth, fuelled by too many resources really being devoted to the property sector. Irish banks had adopted a Flahuluk approach to lending, which culminated in the government of the day guaranteeing their borrowings, thereby inextricably linking the banking debt to our sovereign debt. And the cost, economic, human and otherwise, of rescuing our banks and their creditors has been vast, and it's taken its toll, it's fair to say, on the Irish people. And in 2010, as we all know, regretfully, we were obliged to seek support from the EU and the IMF when the door was closed on the international financial markets. But it's great to have an only friend in town in that the EU ponied up and ensured that we had enough funding to keep our country running and to keep money coming from the ATMs and to ensure that the public sector workers were paid. But there's no doubt whatsoever that the EU and the fact that we are a member of the EU, they certainly played their part in assisting us in that regard and helped us, and we indeed helped them ensure stability in the banking sector. And I think that should never be forgotten by our European decision makers. As a consequence of that decision made by Ireland to guarantee the banking debt, its citizens have suffered to the tune of €64 billion, which is a considerable amount. We have taken our hit and played our part in the economic malaise. Taxes have increased and expenditure has been curtailed in the country. The size of the public sector has been reduced and salaries have been cut by an average of 15%. But the measures that we have had to take have been difficult, and there have been no easy choices, it's fair to say. And now we need to be shown that there is daylight at the end of the tunnel, which should manifest itself as relieving the burden of our bank-related debt before our presidency finishes. After all, we have shown that there is a way back from the crisis to all those other countries. You know, for too often we've been mentioned as PIIGS within that acronym. And I look forward to the day when we actually become just PIGS and Ireland is out of it. And I think that time is coming close. And Deputy Higgins, I would urge you, and as I said, all other members of the European Parliament, you know, to recognise, which I know you do, what we have gone through as a country and try and play our part in ensuring that we do get out of the situation. But just before I finish up, Senator Hayden had mentioned the issue of the fodder crisis, and it was only yesterday that I was speaking to a number of members. Leighton, sorry, my apologies. I was only yesterday that I was talking to a number of people from the IFA who had expressed their huge concerns with the situation in France, how people wouldn't load the boats for fear of being, I suppose, contaminated by what they have deemed hazardous substances that's contained within the fodder. I think it's a bit outlandish in terms of what they're alleging, but anyway, I'd appreciate, Deputy, if efforts could be made to lobby the EU as well and to ensure that maybe an emergency fund is set up to assist farmers right throughout the European Union if they find themselves in the circumstances that Irish farmers have found themselves, and in particular in the West Coast in recent days. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Higgins. Now, Deputy Higgins, you can respond to all of those, or we have further opportunity for questions, and maybe we'll take the questions from the other senators, if you like, and reply to them all together, whichever suits you.
I'm very much in the hands of the House, which, whatever the House wants to do.
I think the members would like, we'd have the questions, so yeah, okay. Okay, so each senator can ask at least 2 questions and try and confine it to a minute. So I'll call on Senator Couch Keane.
Thank you very much indeed, and welcome, Deputy, to the House, and for the kind words you said about the House and your enjoyable experience here. You're not supposed to enjoy anything in politics, it's painful all the way, you know. And I just have a question basically on the future of Europe and the talk and about the referendum in the UK and the 130 MPs that voted recently in the EU about the Queen's speech, not including the referendum and the trouble that's going to cause. I don't want you to comment on the internal politics of it, but the knock-on effect of, if it were a thing for the referendum in England, having a knock-on effect with our closest allies here, commercially wise. That's one question. And the second question is, I know there was a book published last year on the future of Europe, and Senator Gillian Van Turner mentioned the conference on the future of Europe, but this particular book, it was Jean-Claude Prius that wrote it, and he was a legal architect at a lot of the architecture of the EU and the proposals that he has seen going forward for the European Union. And I want to ask you, is the European Union well prepared to address current and future challenges that it would face? One is the terminology used for a 2-speed Europe, and the second one is that closer integration with certain member states as the Lisbon Treaty would provide for. Is the debate ongoing in Europe, or is it happening at all, or will it land on us? We've had enough surprises in this country without having to cater for any more, and I think we should be prepared for all eventualities. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Susan O'Keefe.
Thank you, Chair. You're very welcome, Deputy Higgins. The last time our paths crossed, I think we were watching the debacle of the dustbin recount in Castlebar at the European elections, but let's not go there. I would like, perhaps you might, if you can remember what the slogan was that young girl actually gave you, the winning Donegal young girl. I'd like to hear that, if we might. I would be interested to know, like Senator Keane, what is being said, if you like, in the corridors of Brussels about the UK position. What is the sort of feeling among your colleagues and among staff and among people there about the impact that may have, and whether it's as unsettling as it may appear? I'd like also to ask whether you think that the Common Agricultural Policy will do enough for small farmers. You represent many small farmers in that enormous constituency of the North West, and I'm sure that many of them have made representation to you about their concerns about the Common Agricultural Policy, and I just wonder whether that's something that you might have a thought upon. Finally, 2 things: the rotating presidency, and certainly I would share your views about the Irish presidency. Is it something that, while there doesn't seem to be another solution to it, it does seem to cause a lot of upheaval in Europe every time it switches, and of course there are countries that are better able and better placed to do the presidency than others, and some have more experience and so on. Is there another formula that might work, or is it satisfactory, do you think? And finally, yesterday in the debate we had here about Seanad's reform, I was one among others who said that we believed that the future of the Seanad lay in our role here in the scrutiny of European legislation as the national house for legislation that comes from Europe, with the fact that the Lisbon Treaty now gives us the status to scrutinise that legislation. And I wonder what your view is as a former senator and as an MEP of some distinction. Thank you for your time.
Senator O'Keefe. Senator Vanabachik.
Thank you, Laska Hirlik, and apologies that I wasn't here for the speech, but you're very welcome to the House, Deputy Higgins. And I think deputy is the correct phrase. We've learned it during the number of presentations by MEPs that we've had over this presidency. I just wanted to follow on from Senator O'Keefe's question about scrutiny of EU
EU legislation, because it is something we've debated in this House, as you said, just last night, and indeed over a number of different debates. And something that I've always meant to ask an MEP is, in practice, does this go on in other chambers, in other parliamentary chambers around Europe? Are MEPs aware of it? And if so, how does it work? We scrutinise EU measures in the Justice Committee, of which I'm a member here, clearly only relating to Justice and Home Affairs, but I'm wondering if scrutiny goes on in other in parliamentary chambers as opposed to parliamentary committees, do the results of the scrutiny get fed back into the Parliament? Is there that measure of engagement directly with chambers, with parliamentary chambers nationally? And if so, is there a particularly good model we could adopt here in Ireland? Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Patrick. Senator O'Clougherty, have you a question?
Timing is everything. Tiad fáte eisiau agus mae leisgan ar y mewn sia, fi mae ges letan synefig. Stoi gybi'n cest na almost a hortet o hwy fwsad na gaelge, agus is cesti ordins mwyd y jar. Gwreilta sa Seanad agus brawn o ddecol gwaldini sa Seanad y jar. Ag wsad nis mwyd gaelge dyreir chéle, ach mwyd y canter yn ochtr anach dy fe agyn. Wyl mwyd y baint dohyn desh, as nhw ochtr anach do hwyf an gaelge chwrg yn cyn, agus o hwyf cest na mynd hangach i fod na Europa, mar níl na teangach í teoranta go dtí na tíran an na stáit, tá siad ceang le régiún fi legus mar sin agus tuigim ganúsáid do héine bhil go réalta hálan sin. Gwyl deis an wahan ó híh teangarí agus daoine úsáid na gailge agus bheith dína eisteáin nachú mu a baint. Beidir dó an leas sin go rath I gceist go meach bhádís mú daoine elte le bhil a gobar faoi scáin an éantais agus bebranam do chuúrmaíáil faoi sin. Agus stohí just ceistí bag eile bhaint le gailge bhealach ná tá costas breise a baint le fada a chur teachtarocht takes. Agus tiictar gom agus tá hééis rins fisí an faoi sin. Gomanan se le réalachán Órapacha, gomanan se le socríthe traslan na Europa go gafar áhaig an level sin. Le nach mé costas breise leis, so má mis chur teachtarocht thugad agus me chur Trevor ó Clochartaí, íc me aige breise an ó fada. Rud nachhfuil gil na rééis leis agus. Bhui mis dan éon íonna level na Europa le Corm na féine a hors gan na teangachaí a gcuis.
Good. Now, Mr. Higgins, you can respond to those questions at your.
Got a market, Alaska here, got a market. Good gene, na Seanad Éireann, a chur na ceisne agus as na rudi jazz tá ráite acu. Agus hon tostu leis an ceiste chur an Seanad Éireann Clochartaí. Mar dhealar an géilge mór an trú na úsáid míid, níos mó géilge sa Parliament, os rud go bhfuil an fud neisteachán an, agus ní úsáide na trí feisiirí an géilge go rialtas sa Parliament féin agus Seán Kelly, Pat the Cope agus mé agus tá an dáint ar a fad an go gur siad ceall muna bhfuil míid sásta níos mó úsáide bant as. Tá go jazz, tá go hintar fad gúil an servís agan, agus cai mé ancredible de hors go dtí an tara éman ó cuimh de chreid sé ar son an eisteachán seo. De chreid sé chun ahans do fa gúil a hors den teanga, mar teanga oibrithe sa Parliament sin. Agus os rud na bhfuil seans agan lauch níos mó ná gá ná trí nóid. Níl éon leiscéil an thorbit na bhfuil níos mó úsáide bhaint. As an teanga féin. Chonaic sios deach mar teanga uffagúil oibrithe an céadú láide anar ná just a seach. Agus tá sé an, le cartú níos mó úsáide bhaint as, agus tá an dáint ar fáil an bhuail an go chuir siad de seachar ceall muna bhfuil bit nó muna bhfuil níos mó Seanad Éireann feisiilí sásta é úsáid. So éantain go thomláin leis a méidir taráte agat. Can I thank, first of all, Senator Terry Leighton for his very kind comments. One of the things that is very much off the radar at present and is crucially important for this country, and I didn't mention it deliberately in my contribution, and that is the possible reduction in the number of MEPs from 12 to 11. Remember when we had the first direct elections in 1979 with 15. 15 went to 13. 13 went to 12. And now, as a result of a decision taken in the Parliament itself, and of course, you can't blame the Germans and the French and so on, the Germans are going from 99 down to 9.